Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to cover some Angsty Reads because like everyone else, at least like most people, I went through a huge angst phase. And that pretty much started when I was around 15, which kind of was the kickoff to my current reading like obsession slash habit that really had been dormant since like between I started really reading with Harry Potter in like fourth grade or so when the first four books were out. And I was like a huge avid reader at that time, but somewhere in middle school, going all the way through most of high school, I kind of wasn't until I ran into some of these books. So today I kind of want to talk about them. If you want to hear more in-depth reviews of some of these books, let me know about that in the comments down below. But make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, like I said, I went through a huge angst phase, and the beginning of which was, at least in my clearest memories, I can remember being about 15 or so when I found this first book I want to talk about, which of course I already have a review of on the channel. So let me kind of just preface the discovery of this book with what led me to this essentially. It'll make sense when I talk about it a little more. So the thing that led me to this first book started when I was about 12 and a half or so. So when I was about 12, like roughly 12 and a half, the Disney Channel original movie, The 13th Year, came out. And when that movie came out, I was almost 13, and the entire premise of the movie is this boy, when he turns 13, he transforms into a merman. So you can probably see where I'm going with this. I thought I was going to turn into a freaking merman at 13, to the point that, like, not just hoped I would, not just speculated or not just a wish. Like, I knew I was going to. Like, you couldn't tell me nothing. Like, I just knew at the age of 13, I was going to be a merman. I was going to say deuces to all this bullshit on land, and I was just going to, I guess, go to Lake Michigan or something, because clearly I hadn't thought it out that much, but it was a huge thing. So it kind of actually started my mild obsession with mermaids for a while. I've always loved werewolves and dragons and stuff, but for a long time, I've always really liked mermaids and the idea of just mer people, because for a long time it just kind of made logical sense to me in a way. But so that interest basically stuck with me for years. So by the time I was 15 or so, in about 10th grade, I was just meandering through the school library looking for books on breathing underwater, because I was wondering if there was any scientific basis, or like trying to see if anybody had figured out how to like hold their breath for 10 minutes or something like that. I was just kind of doing random like research like I kind of do now, but like I just kind of did it. So along the way, looking through the stacks, looking for books about breathing underwater, I ran into this book called Breathing Underwater. So I have a paperback version of it now, but it doesn't have as good a cover as the main cover that I really like, which is this cover. Um, that was the cover that I saw in the school library. And as soon as I saw it, because it has this artistic style to it, like with the crayon etching and stuff, it immediately piqued my interest as an artist, because I've always been a sketch artist and all this kind of stuff. And I picked it up and looked at the little synopsis of it, was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I'm curious as to know what this would be. So I literally checked it out. And that day, I went home, started reading it, read the entire thing in that afternoon. Well, I actually stayed up all night. I was up till almost 4 in the morning or so reading it. And that was the first time I'd ever just decided not to go to sleep to read a book. And it was the first book that ever made me cry, because that book is so dramatic and so intense, especially at 15. So it just became like one of my absolute favorite books immediately. It was literally the first book I ever finished, then closed, and just opened back up and started again. Like, it was that kind of experience. Breathing Underwater is a book that basically tackles the subject of abuse, about legacy abuse, like abuse from your parents, and how that abuse sometimes translate into the person that's being abused becoming an abuser. So this story was like very deep and stuff. I had like no actual experience with like physical abuse, thankfully. Had some like emotional abuse experience and stuff. So it was still fairly relatable to me. And essentially this book kind of just, it was cathartic in a way. It was like these very dramatic kind of terrible things happen, but ultimately they end in a way that kind of promises a future, a better future than the existence then. So that really resonated with me, being in a huge angst phase, because everything felt like it was the end of the world. Everything felt like it was just, everything was just the biggest, most important thing in the world at the moment. So to see these resolutions in these stories where life goes on and it's often better than the situation where it was, where people learn stuff and have these full arcs and stuff, that to me was incredibly cathartic. So it kind of led me down this wormhole where I'm just absolutely like voraciously looking for more books like this. And little did I know it would take like no effort at all to find a bunch of books like this. So I want to talk about a few of them, but I kind of will also rattle off just numerous ones that come to mind because, I'm very top of mind. So Breathing Underwater is written by Alex Flynn. So she also has various other books that are pretty much in the same vein. There is the book Nothing to Lose, and there is Fade to Black, which I read. I read both of those. I think there may be another one in there as well, but I think from Alex Flynn, I only read those three. But all those are very intense, dramatic, but they center around someone around that age, around 15, 16. They're in a very intense, kind of emotionally traumatic kind of scenario. And it kind of just kind of runs through it. And it's never resolved in this like happy pie in the sky, everything's perfect and cuddly and rainbows and stuff. It's never like, and then all of a sudden something, all of a sudden nothing ever happened again. It's not like, a cheesy ending. It always felt like realistic, logical, plausible kind of endings, and that's why I always grew attached to them. So I later on found more books. There's this other book. So another book that is just so full of angst is a book called Shattering Glass. So I didn't know about this. I hadn't heard about it at all until my sister had to read it for one of her English classes, and she was like a senior or something, higher grade than me at the time, and so she recommended this book to me, and I thought it was interesting because it's called Shattering Glass. So I immediately recognized it as a double entendre. So it's like shattering glass, breaking glass, but it's also shattering a person named Glass. So the story is essentially like she's all that, or basically that classic trope in teen rom coms or just teen movies where they will take the popular or take the geeky, like they would take the geeky girl and basically take down her ponytail and take off her glasses, and suddenly she's all beautiful, and then make her popular or whatever. Like it's that kind of thing. But it's this group of boys. They're in either eighth grade or like ninth grade, somewhere in there, and they're essentially the alphas of the school. They're the main, big dogs of the school. They're this little clique that everybody kind of revolves around, and of course, there's the leader that everybody like fawns over and stuff. And they, much like in those movies, basically want to flex their power and control over the student body by saying, let's take the geekiest, most made fun of kid that we can find, and let's turn them into class most popular or whatever. So they essentially do that. They take this kid named Simon Glass. They they invite him into their circle and stuff, and they basically work this plan in order to make him popular so that he can be declared class most popular. Something, either most popular or something most congenial, something like that. But it's essentially most popular. Kind of like in the scenarios where it's always like prom queen or whatever. So this scenario kind of works out exactly like those movies typically do. But the difference here is that the kid that they're manipulating and making popular, he's actually significantly more intelligent than they ever gave him credit for. So he saw from a mile away that that's what they were doing. And they were trying to use their control to make him a product of them. So he wanted to be popular. He had basically all the fundamentals to be popular, but he can never figure it out, like all the cliche things. Like he has rich parents and a house that's always empty because his parents are always off on some trip or whatever. And like he just has like the money, and like he could have all the cool clothes and stuff like that, but he's just not really interested in it. So as things go on, they basically teach him how to use his scenario to his advantage to become popular and stuff. But he doesn't really want to just be generic popular. He enjoys the fact that he can make people laugh, because to him, people laughing with him basically erases any time that they laughed at him. So it's more his actual desire, and he sees what they're planning. So he shifts all of their plans in such a way where he become known as just the class cut up, the class clown. He's not being made fun of anymore. Everybody's now laughing with him. But that goes kind of against what their plan is. So they start to get resentful of him and stuff. And to the point where his plan works out so perfectly, he gets named class most humorous. And of course, the alpha of the group does not appreciate this. So they essentially take him, full spoilers for the ending of the story, but they essentially take him to like the equipment room, which is like their office or whatever. And after he basically reveals to them, like, I knew what y'all were doing. I'm not just going to be some pawn and all this stuff. And then he basically starts to confront them and basically makes them realize that they don't have the amount of control over him that they thought they did. And then he starts to like realizes he's taking the upper hand, and he almost becomes a little drunk with that power and decides to like bully them by exposing the secrets he learned about them throughout this entire event, because not only were they making him popular, but they were having him like do their homework, and he's really good at computers, so they were having him change grades and stuff. So he kind of mentions that he has all this dirt on them and all this stuff, and there's like some abuse speculation about the alpha kid in the group and that he may have been assaulted by his stepdad and stuff. So actually he was assaulted by his stepdad. So the kid uses that to poke at his insecurities about his potential sexuality being affected by his abuse and stuff. So that is the inciting incident, essentially. That's what triggers him to go from lightly threatening this kid to using the baseball bats that's in the equipment room to actually attacking him. He's doing all this to all of them. Like, essentially, the alpha kid, it is the worst thing that he's bringing up, the worst secret, but he's like bringing up all these very sensitive topics to the others. So all of the kids except for one beats him to death with baseball bats, and we kind of learn about all this stuff through their interrogation, and there's police interviews and stuff like that. So that story essentially has a very tragic ending, but it also like taught me a very clear lesson about just the way people in those kind of social situations can behave. Like, people can be manipulative and stuff, and you may think that you have the upper hand by being smarter and seeing it as it happens and trying to manipulate it for your benefit, but ultimately that could still bite you in the ass and stuff. So I kind of took that away from it, because in school I wasn't like super popular or anything. I always just kind of had a group around me, and I've never been like a part of this clique or that clique or anything. There's just always been like people that gravitate towards me, and apart from that I was always friends with everyone from any kind of group. So like I never really experienced the type of isolation or ostracization that he did in that kind of way. But me always having been a big guy, being a chubby guy, basically a fat guy, like I've always kind of had to deal with that. So I understand bullying and stuff just in general, but that was something completely different. And instead of having a all's well that kind of ended well or okay or whatever the case, like that, even though like lessons were learned, it wasn't it all ends nicely kind of cathartic ending thing like most of the other books that I've read are. This one is more of just a tangible, direct, usable lesson. And I think that's also why my sister had to read it for a class, because that type of lesson is very, very like necessary for high school students. I don't know how high school is nowadays. I don't know if anything like that is still a true consideration, especially after having not gone to in-person school for 3 years. I don't know. Maybe I should ask my niece about it. I don't know. But it was a very much needed lesson. Some of these books that I've read, they're very short. They're like 500 words or 500 pages. And I'm surprised that a lot of them haven't been adapted. Some of them could be like, a very special episode or something like that. Like, I'm very surprised Breathing Underwater hasn't been adapted. So this last angsty book I want to talk about, I actually had a copy of it over there. It is called You Don't Know Me. You see this cover? Look how cool that is. I saw that cover and immediately was interested in it. I was so fascinated because it also has just like what feels like real writing. So the cover, I'll just read it because that's what pulled me into it. So I'll just read it for you all. You don't know me at all. You don't know the first thing about me. You don't know where I am writing this from. You don't know what I look like. You have no power over me. What do you think I look like? Skinny, freckles, wire-rimmed glasses over brown eyes? No, I don't think so. Better look again, deeper. It's like a kaleidoscope, isn't it? 1 minute I'm short, the next I'm tall, 1 minute I'm geeky, 1 minute I'm studly. My shape constantly changes, and the only thing that stays constant is my brown eyes watching you. That's right, I'm watching you right now. I like it because it implies so much, but the story is so not this level of confidence. It is, I feel like this is almost an angst manifesto. Like, that's almost how I feel about it, except this is a story about a young kid who was essentially being abused by his stepdad. His stepdad who, or not even stepdad, his mom's boyfriend, who he hates so much, and he actually ends up coming to resent his mom because she stayed with him despite the fact that he beats him up all the time and is verbally abusive to him. So it gets to the point where he's essentially trying to change John, the main character's personality, by a lot of toxic masculinity kind of stuff. But ultimately, he thinks what will make him, the man he needs to be, ends up being helping him to go steal stuff because he's a thief. His night job is that he's a thief, and he goes and robs places all the time. So it ultimately ends up in a situation where the kid basically has to get the mom's boyfriend basically arrested. And it gets to a point where it's like you think, okay, yay, it's going to just kind of work out, and then the mom will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, but it doesn't really work out like that. It's a lot more realistic in the way that sometimes a parent, if they're more attached to that new relationship or whatever, and not as concerned with truly protecting their child, they will then value that and then resent the child. That's kind of what I was getting from it. But I haven't also read it again in multiple years. So if you're all interested in the full in-depth review, let me know, and I will definitely crack this baby open again and give it a little speed read so we can talk about just how dramatic it is. It's such an easy read. That's why I blitzed through so many of these books. They all got like double spacing and like 14-point font. But yeah, so that's the last one I really want to talk about in depth. But I do also have this one. So this book is so messed up. If my channel was monetized, it probably would be demonetized for this book. This is one of the books that I wouldn't be surprised if it was just completely taken out of schools. Because this is damn near a fictitious Columbine. This is, yeah, it's literally called Give a Boy a Gun. And the entire synopsis on the back is, for as long as they can remember, Brendan and Gary have been mercilessly teased and harassed by the jocks who rule Middleton High. But not everyone, but not anymore. Stealing an arsenal of guns, I can't read, sorry. Stealing a small arsenal of guns from a neighbor, they take their classmates hostage at a school dance. In a panic of his desperate situation, it soon becomes clear that only one thing matters to Brendan and Gary: revenge. And I almost feel like I blocked it out because I don't remember this. Fort Vancouver Regional Library. I don't remember where I bought it, but I know I didn't get it in Canada. Yes. So this is basically what my later teens and early 20s was filled with, was a lot of books like this that were basically my therapy. They were my therapy because every one of these scenarios I realized, because I had a vaguely rough childhood. Like there's a lot of stuff that I'm just not going to go into. And a lot of these books were very cathartic in that a lot of these things had endings. They stopped at a point and they, life was able to keep going. They weren't stuck in it forever, which for a while I felt like I was stuck in my situation forever. So these became incredibly cathartic for me. They basically helped me get out of that phase, even though I think it kind of became a part of my personality in my 20s because I was still wearing like wallet chains and doing like I don't know. Yeah, it's so weird. Getting to your 30s, you look at your 20s and you start to cringe at everything. It's weird. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video before I just completely ramble. We're already like 20 minutes in. But let me know in the comments down below. If you're interested in any of these dramatic-ass reads, we can do some reviews and talk about them. I'll definitely try to keep it light so we're not just talking about, oh, it's so sad. But yeah, that could be fun. Let me know about that in the comments down below. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.